Hi, so this session is a recap of the Vlookup section from class. There's Vlookup, the V stands for vertical. There is also a Hlookup for horizontal. Then a while ago Excel introduced one just called Lookup. And now there's a new one called Xlookup. We're not going to cover Xlookup, I'm going to do a separate video for that. But Vlookup has been around for a long time and is a very useful practice. But there's one other thing before we start Vlookups that I just want to mention briefly, and this is the idea that you can name areas of a spreadsheet, either be it an individual cell or a collection of cells. So for example, when we do a Vlookup in a minute, we're going to look at this, we're going to use this data here. And what might be nice is if I actually called this by a name that I could refer to. So I'm going to show you the process. So if you want to name an individual cell, which you could do, you know, if this cell contained VAT and you were using it in a formula, it might be useful to call it VAT. It might make it more readable. But let's see. So if I'm going to select all of this area and I'm going to call this, so this is like names, IDs to names. Okay, so I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it that. I'm going to call it IDs. Now you can't put spaces in these, so I'm going to use underscores to underscore names. And then you must press enter or return. Okay, and then that's it. And you can see by pressing on the little drop. So normally what this shows you up here in this top left hand corner is the name of, well, it shows you the name of the cell. So I'm in D3, or there's F8, or there's F11. But now I can go to IDs to names. And one nice thing, one tool you can use this for is just to navigate through your spreadsheet. So if you're somewhere else in your spreadsheet and you want to quickly get back to a specific part of it, you can click on there and it jumps you back to the right worksheet in the right part. Obviously, when you've got small worksheets with not a lot on them like this, it doesn't really matter. But if you've got thousands of rows and things like that, and you want to get to the total line, you know, that can be a nice, easy way of jumping down there. So, so we've named that. So let's see. So what is a Vlookup? Let's start with that, just in case we're not sure. So as I mentioned, the V stands for vertical. And so if I was to say that there was a customer ID here, and the customer ID was 7777, and I asked you, what was that person's first name? You would do this probably. You would start at the top or the bottom. You would work your way vertically up this list until you found the 777. And then I said, can I have the first name? So you would look at the column names, ID for that. So you would say, okay, column C, or the third column here is the first name. And so you would say Myra. And that is what a Vlookup does. It looks something up vertically and then returns you whichever column you've asked for. Okay, and there's a few little idiosyncrasies, is that the right word? I think so, about how it works, but we'll look at that. And as I say, this is like an older technology now, but we're teaching it because you're bound to come across it. It's been around for so long that even though there are slightly better ways of doing it now with Xlookup, it's really good to have, you know, to know the fundamentals that were built on. And also by learning the limitations of them, you'll see why the new versions are actually slightly better as well. So let's write this Vlookup. So just grab my keyboard. So I'm going to type an equals. I'm going to type VL for Vlookup, and then I'm going to press tab to auto-complete that. And there is actually there's actually quite a few parts to a Vlookup. So here we can see, so there's 1, 2, 3, there's 3 parameters that we have to put in, and then in the square brackets mean optional. So there is but we will almost always use this optional parameter, which I'll explain in a moment. So the first thing is, well, what value am I looking up? And when we did our little example a minute ago, we used this 7777. So I'm going to click on that. That's the value we're looking up. So we're looking up the value in B15. Now move on to the next part, press comma. Where are we looking? It now says table array. Okay, bit of a scary. So an array, so whereas a range is typically a column or a row of some description, an array typically means a collection of rows or columns. Okay, so here is my table array. And so my table array is going to be So there's two ways. I could either select it with my mouse, or I've named it. So I could start typing, and look, IDs to names pops up there. So I can press tab, and look, it automatically selects it. So this is one of the benefits. And there's another benefit that I'll come on to in a minute. But naming areas can be a really good thing. So what are we doing? We're looking up 7777, okay, in IDs to names. Now the one of the first things to know, and one of the limitations of a VLOOKUP, is that the VLOOKUP will always do its lookup in the first column of whatever I've put in this red section here, okay? And it will always return something to the right of that. So it looks up in the first column that you select and return something to the right. It doesn't have to be column A, B, and C here. It could be columns G, H, I, J, whatever. But it will always look, whichever the first column is in your selection, that's where it's going to look. And that's partly one of the limitations that's been fixed by some of the later versions. But let's carry on with this. So we know what we're looking up. We know where we're looking for. Let's do another comma to move on to the next section. Now this now says column index number, which can be slightly confusing to people because we're used to the columns being letters, A, B, C, etc. In this case, what this number refers to is internally, so to this red selection area that we've got here, which column should I return you if I find a match? And so this is the first column, so the VLOOKUP always takes place in column 1. Wherever the selection is, the VLOOKUP will always be column 1. The second column here is last name, and in fact actually we're doing last name, and the third column is first name. So we actually want a 2 here, okay? Okay, good. And then finally, and this is a bit of an odd thing, which has actually again been fixed in later versions, but by default, I don't know why, but by default it's going to do an approximate match, okay? And you almost never want approximate match. You want, you don't want it to match 7776 or 7778. You want it to match 7777, okay? So we want an exact match. An exact match means you just write false at the end. So it's a little bit weird. They sort of understood that it was a bit weird and not the best design choice for writing a formula, but just know that when you're doing a VLOOKUP, you just stick false at the end of it 99% of the time. I will give an example in a moment of when true, or when you omit that. So let's recap this. I'll put my closure brackets on the end. So we're writing equals VLOOKUP. We're looking up the 7777, which is in B15. Where are we going to try and find it? We're going to try and find it in the first column of what we called IDs to names. If it finds it, we're going to ask it to return us the second column, and we put false on the end because we want it to exactly match. Okay, so this should do Bruno. So let's see, hopefully it will. Great, it does. And then this is the beauty of a VLOOKUP. We can change this number to 5555 and it looks up somebody else. 8888 looks up somebody else. Okay? And if we type in a number that's not there, we actually get an error. Okay? And that's something you wouldn't get if you weren't doing an exact match. Okay, so that's good to know. Okay, so let me show you a trick. So if I was to drag this down to copy it, it's going to break. And the reason it's broken is because it's no longer looking at 888, because I dragged my formula down 1 square. Everything in the formula moves down 1 square. So now it's trying to find the word my in this. Okay, so really what I need to do is repoint this to B15 to make it work. Okay. But now we're getting last name my, first name my. So have a little think for 1 second. I'll tell you the answer almost instantly. But what do we have to change in this formula for it to give us the first name? Okay, okay, good. Now hopefully you said change the column 2 to column 3, and that would have worked. Now the trick I was going to show you is this. Oh yeah, so 2 points really. Notice that I only had to repoint the B15. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to copy this down again. It will break again. It's breaking because, as I mentioned before, it's no longer looking at B15. I moved my formula down 1. Parts of my formula have changed. But notice that my red box here my red box of my data, or array as it's used in this bit of the formula, is termed. Notice that did not change. And it didn't change because I named it. So another one of the nice reasons to name an area is that when you copy or paste a formula, it will never change the area it's pointing to if it's got a name associated with it. So that's a nice trick. The other trick I wanted to show you, so again I'm going to just delete that. So we've seen that, like, if I go Control C, Control V, it copy and paste or drag that handle down, it breaks. But watch this. If you actually, if you select a formula up here in the formula bar, and I copy it, now I must press Enter to come out of it because I was like in edit mode. But now if I press paste, so the logic here is if you copy the actual text of a formula and paste it, then it doesn't change. It doesn't try to be helpful. If you copy the cell with the formula in and paste it, then it will try to be helpful. And again, I just need to change this 2 to a 3 in order to make it work. Now, obviously, this is a simple example. When you're doing, normally the data isn't going to be 10 rows or whatever just directly above you. Probably the best case scenario is the data's in another worksheet somewhere else in your workbook. Most of the time, Vlookups are often used to pull in data from other workbooks. Okay, so as long as your computer, you might have a shared drive or something like that, as long as your computer could open the workbook, as long as you've got access, a path to wherever that workbook is sitting, be it on an external server or somewhere else on your computer, as long as you could just double click and open it, then a Vlookup can pull information from it. So it's a very powerful and very useful tool. So that's the demo one. Feel free to copy what I've written here. Remember that I did name my areas, my area first. And just as a quick reminder, it was select it, come up here and type into that box. Okay, that's how you name an area. And what we want you to do, okay, is on this page, okay, slightly bigger amount of data, not a lot bigger, but slightly bigger, in fact, same names. We want you to write some Vlookups that get the customer's name. You can choose whether it's first name or last name, okay? And then you fill in the delivery address. Address 1, the city, the county, and the postcode. So most of it is going to be a very similar formula, just requesting. So this is where you're going to look it up, this 1111, and that's going to look up vertically in this table here. And then you're going to have it fill out these different bits here. Okay. So let's talk about this idea of when you might want a true at the end of the formula. Well, so it works exactly the same way, apart from we put true at the end here. But the difference is that when it looks through the data must be in order. Okay, so the data must be ordered. This isn't in order, like we've got 3, 3, then 2, 2, then 7, 7, like it gets bigger, smaller. It's not in the order. Okay. Whereas here, for example, we do have some ordered data. You can see that this is clearly getting bigger each time. Okay, and this is an example of where you might want to use this. So, for example, I'm not going to write you the whole thing. I'm just going to give you a hint. So, if we use this as our data, okay, maybe we could name that area. That might be a little hint. This is where it's useful. So, this is a sales chart. And it's one of those things that the more things you buy, the greater the discount this shop will give you. So if you buy 1 to 9 things, they don't care, you only get 0%. If you buy 10 to 100 things, then you get 3%. And when you hit 100 sales, then you start getting 6% off, etc. So hopefully you understand what that table is showing you. Okay. Now, here's the question. If you were using a Vlookup with an exact match, if it was an exact match, and I said to you, find me the number 9 in this table to give me what discount would I have if I was sold 9 units? Well, we know, looking at this, that, well, you would be, it's bigger than 1, but it's less than 10, so we don't qualify for the 3%. So really, at 9, you'd be on 0%. Okay, and that's where this is handy. So this approximate match, it will approximately match to whichever the number. So the way it works is the 9 would come over here, it would say, okay, I'm bigger than 9, so it would, I'm bigger than 1, sorry, it would move down to 10. It would get to 10 and it would say, I'm not as big as 10, so it would return you whatever number it was equal or less than 2. Okay, so 10, so again, the 22 would match with the 10, and even the 95 would match with the 10, because it would say, 100's bigger, so I drop down to the next number that the number I'm looking for is equal or larger to. Okay, and that's a good clue there. So so what this probably should say, so you can do a 1 or a 0, but if I write true here, that's probably a little bit more what you're going to put at the end. So you're going to write a VLOOKUP that looks at this number 9 in this table here and has a true at the end instead of false. Now, like I say, most of the time you're not going to be doing it that way, but that's an example. Now, let's have a look at another thing here. We'll have a quick look. And by the way, for the qualification, this is as far as you need to go. Okay, in fact, you probably don't even need to do this bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, these 5 VLOOKUPs is enough. Okay, but you may want to learn some more stuff, and that's what we're here for. So this is, let's try it the other way. So I mentioned that there's a VLOOKUP, there's also a Hlookup. So let me just talk to you briefly about a Hlookup, and I'll also give me time to show you a trick. So I'm going to copy that with Control-C, and now I'm going to paste this data. And when I paste it, I'm going to transpose it. Okay. Now I'm actually doing this on a Mac. This is one of the ever so slight differences between a Mac and a PC is the icons are slightly different. So this says the word transpose. On a PC, you get a little, there's 5 paste icons, and one of them has a vertical line, like showing cells this way, and another vertical cell showing them that way. And that's transpose. And what transpose means is it means if it was vertical, make it horizontal, and if it was horizontal, make it vertical. So, I've seen people in the past painstakingly changing the layout of their data, and transpose is already good for that. Okay, so let's have a quick go at doing the same thing again. Here, I'm going to delete these 2. I'm going to look up 888, but this time I'm going to look it up in this area, which I'm just going to call, I'm going to really abbreviate it just to the, I'm going to call it horizontal IDs to names, HITN. Not a good name, but let's just, for brevity, let's just call it that. And now you'll notice that I've got two named areas. I've got IDs to names here, and I've got my horizontal IDs to names here. But it works almost identically, so I can go through this reasonably quickly. So I want to look up, so the vertical one, the VLOOKUP, would look vertically and come across to the appropriate column. As you might imagine, the horizontal one will look horizontally. So say I'm trying to find this 8888, it will start here, it will go along, it's the very last one, it will find it, and then depending on which row I ask for, it will give me back either the first or last name. So let's write this as a Hlookup, horizontal lookup. Again, the same parameter at the start. I want to look up that 8888, comma, where do I want to look it up? Well, in the name that I called horizontal IDs to names. Okay, now be careful on this one. The row index number, sometimes so what we're doing, we're doing last name. Last name is in row 20, but writing 20 would be a mistake. It's the internal row number. Okay, so it's almost the same as the column. So this is the first row with the 332277, etc. The second row is the last names. The third row is the first names. So as we're doing last name, I'm going to say give me the second row, and remember most of the time we use false. Okay, so hopefully this will say my. Excellent, it does. I'm going to do that same trick that I showed you before, where I copy the text of a formula, Control-C. I have to press enter because I'm editing the formula. I'm going to press Control-V now to paste it. And now, again, it's the same as last time. What do I change in this formula to get it to give me the first name? I change this 2 to a 3. So I say give me the third row that's internal. And there I go. So now I've got Tony Mai. Let's just check that this is working with a different name, different number, sorry. And it does. Great. So that's the, now, so what you're going to do in this column is you're going to try and look up the cost for CAD, for example, then DKD, then PPV. So these are all going to be Hlookups. So, for example, CAD, the cost of CAD is, we've come over here, here's our horizontal chart, and we would say the cost is the 4th row. So this should say 900. Oops. And the bottom one, tug, should be, go all the way across, let's do it manually, Hlookup, gets to tug, comes down, 999. So your first one should say 900, your last one should say 999. Now, if you're flying along here and you're finding this all very easy, this is a bit more of a challenge. So if you remember when we did ifs, you can nest one if inside another. Well, it turns out you can nest any type of formula inside of any type of formula. Okay, so here the concept is we're putting one Hlookup inside another. And look, I give you an example here of the sort of way you would write it. Okay, so let's just work out what the tax per mile for CAD is, and maybe this will help. Remember, this is purely optional, purely if you like in the challenge. So let's see, so CAD, tax per mile. So the tax per mile is actually from this chart up here, this little data set. And this needs to know the state. And this data set does contain the state. So let's see how we would do it. We would say, okay, CAD, well, CAD is in the state of Maryland. Then I go up to this table and I say, okay, well, Maryland is £2.20. So really, if you were doing this per, in one go, that would say £2.20 there. Okay. Now, that can be, this is quite a complicated formula, and people that are more used to Excel may be able to do it. If you're a bit newer to it, don't worry about it at all. But if you really want to crack it, and I do encourage you to, but if you want to crack it, the way to maybe do it is to break it down into stages. And this is how I write more complicated formulas. It's a really good approach. So what I would actually do in real life is I would write one formula here that would give me the state. And that's easy, it's the same formula that gave you the 900, but instead of asking for the 4th row, you ask it for the 2nd row. So you should be able to pretty easily get that to say Maryland. And then what I would do is I would have another one here. I'm just going to copy this so I get the formatting. And then I would have this say tax per mile. Okay, and what this would do, I'll just double click on this. What this would do is you would write another Hlookup that looks up Maryland in another table here. So this would then say £2.20. Oops, £2.20. There we go. Yeah. So if you don't feel confident to write it in one go, so remember this would be a Hlookup on the word CAD in this table, and it would give you Maryland. Okay. This is another Hlookup on this word then, this time here. And then it's actually quite easy to take the formula that's in one cell and drop it into another to merge them all together. Okay. And then this, so what I'll do here is I'll just do one example of Lookup. And Lookup was something that came around a few years ago, and it solves one of the problems of Vlookup, but it introduces a limitation at the same time, which is a shame. And I'm pleased to say that Xlookup solves both of these, and like I say, there'll be a separate video on Xlookup. So the limitation, one of the limitations for Vlookup, as I mentioned earlier, is it will always look in the left-hand column. So let's say, for example, that this was our data, or this is our data, right? And all we've got is the order IDs, and the order IDs are right in the middle. Now, one way you could fix this, and what people have traditionally done, is they've copied this column or moved this column to the left, and then they can do a VLOOKUP with it. But it might be that, you know, this is being given to you from another program, and it might have to go into another, it might have to be exported out as a CSV or something like that. Then there's certainly good reasons why you couldn't move that column. And so they invented Lookup, okay? And the way Lookup works is, it's actually in some ways a bit easier, but the major limitation of Lookup. So what the good thing about Lookup is, if I want to get the date, so look, this 116899. So where is that? If I go down here, 1111, here it is. All right. So the date that this order was processed on is the 20th of January 2014. You can see it here. Okay. So this is something you wouldn't be able to do with a VLOOKUP. You can't look up in this column and go to the left. You can't do that. So, you know, there's some nice benefit. The downside of Lookup is, again, well, not again, but this has to be ordered. It only works with an ordered list. So you can see these IDs are incrementing, not necessarily in order, but they are, you know, you know that this number is bigger than all of the numbers preceding it. Yeah. So it's an ordered list. And as I say, XLOOKUP is even better than this one. But let me just show you this anyway. So let's look at Lookup. So, and in fact, look, you can see here the lookup functions: lookup, HLOOKUP, VLOOKUP. So we've done HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. We're going to look at Lookup, and then I'll say there's a separate video for XLOOKUP. All right. Because not everybody will have this. You've got to have quite a modern version of Excel. Okay, let's do Lookup. So, it's quite nice. It's quite nice. So, the first thing is, what are we going to look up? Okay, the same as the other two. So I'm going to say, well, we're looking up this value here. Okay, and now it's quite nice. So what it does is you do a comma, and then it's, where am I looking for it? Well, I'm just going to do, so notice last time I did like a large selection of all my data. Now I'm just going to specify the columns that I'm interested in. So I'm going to say, well, I'm interested in this column, comma, and I want my answer to come from this column. So a little bit simpler, slightly more verbose, slightly longer, because instead of, in the past I would say, give me back the second column. Now I have to put in the full references, but I would argue that's not particularly hard to do, and it's nice and explicit, isn't it? Look up this, where in the red column, what should I do? Give me back something from this purple column. Okay, so let's see if it gives me the right date. It did. But again, the limitation is this must be ordered, and your data might not be ordered, and you might not be able to change it. Obviously, you can normally sort things, but then does that break something else? I don't know. But this does overcome the problem of going to the being able to retrieve information from the left. So I've done one as an example there. I'll leave that on the screen for a second. And what we want you to do, and again, this is just for fun. You don't have to do this for the qualification, but if you wish to, have a go at trying to find the sales rep. So in this example, it would be this Maria, and then get the cost. And the cost is something that comes from the right. So you just get some examples of taking two things from the left and one thing from the right. And then finally, and this is really useful to practice on this one. This is, you know, I would advise you to have a go at this, because this is far more real world. It's not because it's a huge set of data, but just because it's not on the same page. And you'll notice that there's a couple of little quirks when you're using Excel that it's just nice to have a little practice of doing it. So what I want you to do here, for example, it says customer full name. Depends how confident you felt doing this. You can try and get their full name. Now, let me show you how you would do it. So my name is Dan and my surname is Heford. Okay. And if I wanted to blend these two together, so let me, as an example, right? The shortest formula you can sort of do is equals another cell. All right, so that works. And what I can do is I can use the ampersand, the and I can point to another cell. Okay, so that then puts both my names together. Obviously, no space. So what I would really do, ideally, is I would say like that. I would say A20 and a space and A21, and that's going to look how we want it to do. Now, that's a really good clue for how you get this customer full name, because where that says A20, that's a VLOOKUP to get the person's first name. Then you drop in this little and, quote, space, quote, and, just to give you the space. And then this, where it says A21, that would be another VLOOKUP to get the person's last name. If that sounds like that's, whoa, what the hell are you talking about? Don't worry, you don't have to do that. But what I would definitely suggest you having a go at doing is just trying to pull the first or the last name if the other bit seemed overly complicated, because you want to maybe name this area over here and just have a go at trying to pull some information from one sheet to another, because it's far more real life sort of usage. And you'll notice that when you're writing your formula, if in the middle of writing a formula you then click over here, then it's going to try and be helpful. It's going to drop that name into your formula and mess it up. So but you'll just get an idea of how to do it. And this doesn't matter. It's not an important document, just to us because we want it back from you at the end. But it's just a nice way of practicing on something that doesn't matter if you break it. Okay. And so here's your customer full name. Then you can also pull out the county and the postcode. Okay. So there's your county. There's your postcode. So that should be relatively easy. And then here's a bit of a challenge. So we put this in. The postage costs are going to be one of, if you haven't done the ifs yet, don't worry about this, you can leave this off. If you have done the ifs and you found them quite easy, you were good at them, then have a go at trying to do the harder option. Okay, so the easier option is to do an if on the county, and if the county says Gloss, then give it £2, and if the county says Leeds, charge £3. So that's relatively easy with an if. If, however, you find that quite easy, you can opt for this additional one for extra imaginary points, and you can try and ascertain if they live in Mountainville. Now the problem is that the county and the postcode don't tell you if they live in Mountainville. There's only one person that lives in Mountainville here, okay? But Mountainville is like a suburb of Leeds in this pretend thing. So what you have to do, I'll sort of describe it, and you have to see if you can write an if that does it. The description would be as follows. So check to see if the county is Gloucestershire, and if it is, you need to do a VLOOKUP to see if the town equals Mountainville. That's quite tricky. That's quite tricky, but it's a good puzzle. If you're into Excel and you want to challenge yourself, that's a good puzzle. And we want it all in one go, in one formula. Okay, so and like I say, all we really want you to do for the coursework, if you do these 5 VLOOKUPs here, that's plenty of examples of you demonstrating VLOOKUPs. That's great for us. Okay, if you want to do another easier one, then this Hlookup, first column for cost, you should be able to do that. I think if you can do this VLOOKUP, these here, okay. This one, remember, instead of true at the end, it's false. Instead of false at the end, it's true. So that should be not too bad to do. It's quite a simple enough formula as long as you've understood what I've explained. Then you can have a go at doing these lookups. These are quite easy to do, really. Remember, it's just what am I looking up? Where am I looking it up? Where do I want my answer? And then if you want to challenge yourself, or just have a go at doing some of these 2 basic ones are quite good to just do, just for working on another sheet. As always, if you want any help, please get in contact with us. And I look forward to seeing you in another video. Thank you very much.